Hello, it's another lovely spring day here in England, and I just want to quickly say that I'm really enjoying making this series for you guys because, I've talked to so many clients and learners and fellow polyglots over the years, and I think that maintaining a language is definitely one of the biggest struggles for a lot of learners. And, it really doesn't have to be painful. I can honestly tell you that maintaining my foreign languages is one of the biggest pleasures in my life, honestly. It's such a nice feeling when you're able to really be on top of your foreign languages and you see them being maintained and also developing over time, and you're just able to enjoy all of the hard work that you put in to develop those skills without the stress and the everyday struggle of and the guilt of knowing that they're not being maintained. So I just want to help as many people as I can stop struggling with that issue and start enjoying it, because it's enriched my life tremendously. So today I'm going to outline the 4 basic approaches that I've identified to maintaining a foreign language. And this, in my course, the first half of my Maintaining Languages course that is going to be ready soon, it's for people maintaining one language. So the average language learner. And then the second half is what I call becoming a language project manager for people maintaining lots of different languages. And I'm not going to be able to detail the differences between the two in this video, so this will just be a broad outline. Now, the first approach is the Frantic Approach. Now, this is where I see most inexperienced language learners sort of fall by default. Now, this is basically where you're either switching a lot, so you don't have enough confidence yet or enough understanding of your own language learning process to effectively organize or define your activities. And so you switch a lot. So maybe 1 minute you're doing Pimsleur and the next minute you think, I should be trying Michel Thomas perhaps. And then you decide to try reading a novel instead, and then that's too difficult, so you switch. And the other side of the spectrum is where maybe you have a bit more experience and you do know various things that work for you, but you spread yourself way too thin. And so I see a lot of people make this mistake where they have a novel they're reading, but then they have a nonfiction book, and they also have a TV series and a YouTube series, and then they're on Netflix trying to study the subtitles of this and that. And the problem, no matter where you fall on the spectrum of this approach, the problem is that it's very difficult to track your progress and your activities. And I find that most people that do this approach, you rarely finish things. Okay, so you're spread so thin that you rarely actually finish anything. And I think all of this exacerbates the very prevalent problem of the intermediate plateau, where it's very frustrating because you feel like you're making any progress. You don't see any progress in your abilities. And part of that is because you can't track it. So there's nothing tangible. And so you're just relying on how it feels. Do you feel better or not? And very often we don't realize that we are in fact better. So that's why this is not a good place to be, in my opinion. Now, the next approach is the casual approach. Now, the casual approach is, it's not a bad thing. And honestly, I find this is where a lot of even pretty advanced language learners fall. It's where you essentially rely on your mood to dictate your activities. So if we're talking about one language, if you're in the mood to listen, then you'll listen. And if you're in the mood to read, you'll read. If it's multiple languages, maybe, hey, I'm just in the mood to do French today, so I'm going to work on that. And I have to say, very quickly, this worked for me, but I think that's because first of all, I'm somebody who gets up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and I study like all throughout the day. No matter what I'm doing, and I am a very productive person and very focused, I think. I don't think this would have worked if I had either a limited amount of time or if I was somebody who struggled with procrastination or being focused. And I've found over time that a lot of people do struggle with that. And so while there are, I know a wonderful polyglot named Carole Westerkamp. She's given some fantastic talks at the different conferences and gatherings. I'll leave some links below perhaps. And she calls herself the lazy polyglot because she's she has amazing language abilities, and she really can sort of turn most of those languages on whenever she wants to some degree of fluency. It's very impressive. But she learned her languages over time and doesn't necessarily have such a structured approach to things. And it works for her. However, she's very special and she has a lot of experience doing this. And so it can work for some people, but I've found over time that this approach can be problematic because if you're following your mood, let's say you're doing one language and you're just not in the mood to practice your active skills, you're just listening all the time or reading, well, over time that leads to an imbalance in your activities and therefore your language skills. If you have lots of languages on the go, it's that, you're more in the mood for your French or for your German, and then your Italian just kind of gets left on the back. And then over time, that gets neglected longer and longer, and it starts to deteriorate. And it becomes more and more difficult to maintain all of your languages in a balanced way. So, and that's the reason why, there's lots of people online nowadays claiming to speak 8, 9 languages or 10 or more. And there's some really good language learners, honestly. But to me, in my experience at least, it's much more rare to find somebody who actually speaks 8 languages at a very high level, but who also has them all maintained properly. So a lot of people I meet, they may at one time have spoken 8 languages, let's say, or 5, but a lot of those languages at the moment are very, very rusty, and if they wanted to speak them effectively, they'd need to spend some time sort of brushing them up and getting them back up to speed. And I want to say there is nothing wrong with that, frankly. It really all depends on your goals. But if you want to have all your languages maintained and up to scratch, then I recommend the balanced approach. But first, let's talk about the structured approach, which is number 3. The structured approach is where you're going to be setting yourself rules, very strict rules to be followed. So it's also very targeted. So you're going to be targeting specifically your active or your passive skills. Maybe you're going to define exactly what activities you'll do throughout the day or on different days of the week. Or if you have lots of languages, I've seen quite a lot of people who have a strict rotation where they actually rotate through all their languages throughout the day. Now, the benefits of this is that it is the most reliable or predictable approach. So because you can say to yourself, okay, if I follow this plan, then I will do X amount of work in X amount of weeks or months. And so therefore you can obviously you can more accurately predict what the outcome may be in 6 months or in 1 year, whatever. The negatives are, first of all, I have actually met very few people who can maintain or stick to this type of a rigid plan. And I have to say it's less fun. So it starts to become a bit more like a training regimen. Now, if you have very specific goals or needs of what you need to accomplish in X amount of time, then this can work. But those are the negatives, is that, you may end up falling off altogether, and then it just doesn't help. Now, the last approach is what I call the balanced approach, which is obviously the one I prefer and I recommend for most people. This is where obviously you're going to have an inherent sort of amount of structure to your approach and organization, but you allow yourself flexibility at certain times based on your mood. So what this means for me is, now, one of the biggest keys to my personal success and what has helped many of my students also succeed with maintaining their languages is a tracking system that I developed when I was living in Germany. Because I found I really needed to find a way to track my knowledge and progress in all my languages. So basically, they're almost like project management sheets that I create for each language. And what I do is I list out the various resources I'm using for that language, and then I essentially quantify and enumerate my knowledge, my progress with that activity. So let's say it's a book. Well, I write down the book I'm reading, and then I put a number in a box for each chapter of the book. And then as I read a chapter, I fill in the bubble or the box, and so on and so forth. And I'll show a couple shots here of some old sheets that I made while I was in Germany and I used for months and months, and that helped me tremendously. And then I also have some brand new ones I made now since I'm sort of restarting the process. Now, I also do often have sort of a rotation. Now I'll talk more about what this looks like in another video, but I rotate between languages. I don't do a daily thing where I study all languages every day. I have 2 or 3 that I'm focusing on now, and then in a few weeks I'll switch it to the other languages. But I also am very flexible. So right now I'm focusing mostly on French and German. But you know what? If I'm in the mood to watch an Italian film tonight, then I'm going to enjoy that film and watch it. I don't necessarily force myself to stick to the structure and the rigid rules that I set. So I find this is the best, because having that structure and, tracking your progress is the key, because it's tangible progress. And so I think this helps combat that intermediate plateau, because no matter how you feel, you can see very clearly, like, wow, this is what I've achieved. I have finished 1 chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters. I studied 1 episode of this YouTube series, or whatever you're doing. I finished 1 module of this course. And it feels great to see your tracking sheet fill up over time. And it's like a to-do list. It feels good ticking things off. It feels good filling those bubbles in. And sometimes I literally end up studying even more, because I think, oh, you know what? I really want to do 1 more. I want to fill in 1 more box. I want to highlight 1 more number. And so I'll study more. And then finally, it helps you keep track. So if you fall off and you don't study your language for a few weeks or whatever it might be, well, you're able to see exactly what you did. And I just think all of this helps you to have an inherent organization. No matter what approach you're following, having that tracking sheet that I developed helps me. In my course, I've actually designed some really nice versions of that you can have. But you could develop any sort of tracking system you want. So anyway, that's it for today. Those are my 4 approaches to maintaining a foreign language. I really hope that helps you, and there's going to be plenty more videos where I'll detail other aspects of maintaining foreign languages. So please subscribe if you are enjoying these videos and you want to keep up with them. And please, please, please leave me a comment if you have any questions whatsoever, and I'll be happy to answer them as soon as I can. Thank you. Bye.